Right, so we've got this query from the last lecture. Now let's add the word not into the subquery. So I'm selecting employee number from table employee where the employee last name not like Y percentage. So in other words, it doesn't start with a Y. Now I'll just remind you that employee numbers in table employee start from 123. So what are we going to see in this inner query? We're going to see all of the numbers from 123 onwards, excluding 126 through 129, as you can see here. And we have those outliers at the end, 2001, 2004. So if I now run the entire query, we have all of the transactions for those employee numbers we just saw. Now, that is a very important statement. It is not all of the transactions in table transaction for all the employees except 126 through 129. Let's just run this again. This statement here limits what table transaction employee numbers we see. So we have a total of 2,219 rows. Now what's going to be the difference if I take this not and put it here? Will there be any difference if it's now in the where clause as opposed to the subquery? So we have where employee number not in the select employee number starting with Y. Well, let's just have a run of this subquery and we see that we're back to 126 through 129. Now let's have a run of the entire query and we've got employee number 1, 3, 4, 6, 8, 10. In other words, all those things which do not occur in table employee. So we are now seeing the entirety of table transaction, which is 2,486 rows, except the 8 rows in table transaction where the employee number is equal to 126 to 129. However, what we previously had where the not was in the subquery was that we were limiting the employee number in table transaction solely to those which are in the table employee, which doesn't include employee numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8. So table transaction starts with 1, 2, 3, but this where limits it to those which are in table employee. So the net effect, if I put these two particular statements underneath each other, this first one where the not is in the subquery limits the results to being those which are contained in table employee, whereas the second one where the not is in the where clause as opposed to the subquery doesn't so limit. The employee number starts at number 1. So that means that the first one, the results must be in table employee and table transaction, and they mustn't be 126 through 129, whereas the second one, the table employee number must be in table transaction and not 126 to 129. So it doesn't matter whether it's in table employee. I'm just saying we have numbers 126 through 129 in here, choose everything else, whereas in the first one we're saying I only want you to choose those which are on table employee, but not 126 through 129. So if you look at it in terms of joins, this first example is the equivalent to an inner join. And the second example is equivalent to a left join. So you can see how you can get radically different answers from very similar queries. So this is part of the reason why I like subjoins, because you can actually see what the answer is going to be in bits. I know that this one is giving me just these employee numbers, and I know that the second one is giving me everything but. Now it could be that your way of working might be that you prefer to use the joins, because now you can see it's going to be all of those which are on table transaction and where they exist in table employee, and you can see that the inner join is where they exist in both. But you need to understand the differences between the not in the subquery and the not out of the subquery. Otherwise, you will be making mistakes, unfortunately.